Hey guys, how's it going? I'm Rob with American Angling, and today we're talking about spinnerbaits. Why, when, where, and why the heck aren't you using more spinnerbaits? Before we get into that though, I got one thing to mention. So we have been enabled for memberships on this channel. If you are a fan of what we're doing here, be sure to hit that join button down below, sign up for membership, and help the channel along more than you know. If you're interested in that, I really appreciate it. It helps push the channel along, and it helps us do what we gotta do to catch more fish. Let's dive into this. All right, so spinnerbaits. We've got two essential types of spinnerbaits. You've got willow blades and Colorado blades. Now, depending on what you're doing, you're going to be running into a few different things, right? So let's say you're fishing spinnerbaits right now, which is a perfect time. All summer long, all spring long, and really far into the fall before the lakes turn over, spinnerbaits are freaking amazing. Right now, actually, it's like the perfect time to be throwing spinnerbaits. So, right now, what I would be throwing is a 7 foot to 7.5 foot medium heavy rod. It's about 40 to 50 pound braid with a fairly quick reel, something that pulls up like 28 to 31 inches of line, something in that area. If that is what you've got, you're in good shape. So, what I'm gonna be doing with this setup is first thing in the morning, I'm gonna go run the shoreline. These fish should be pushed up shallow right now, and a lot of time throughout the year, honestly. They're chasing bait fish. If you're down south, match the hatch. If you're up north, match the hatch. There's a lot of times where people get so hung up on color of the skirt. Meanwhile, I've got two colors, chartreuse and white, and golden shiner double willows. Those are my two. They work anywhere in the country. As far as Colorado blade goes, I'm going to go bold bluegill, something like that. Or maybe like a black blue, because I'm fishing a lot of Colorado blades at night. They are so good at night. So what we're going to be doing is running these shorelines. What I'm looking for is areas with flats, underwater points, areas with submergent grass that comes up just shy of the surface. I'm looking for emergent cover. Emergent cover, things like laydowns, docks, rocks that stick up out of the water, submerged boats. You know, things like that that show just above the surface. Now, think about this from the fish's standpoint. If the fish is under a dock, okay, typically it's going to be under that dock, looking out, either front or to the side of the dock. So it doesn't make a ton of sense to run those docks slowly with something like a Senko or a wacky worm. What I'm going to do is I'm going to approach that series of docks. I'm going to throw on the right side, center, and left side of that dock. 3 casts with a spinnerbait. That should help me narrow down pretty quickly what these fish are doing. The double willow blade, I'm calling a finesse bait. The Colorado blade, I'm calling more of a felt bait, if that makes sense. So double willows won't necessarily cause a lot of vibration. They won't cause a lot of ruckus in the water. Instead, the flash. It's more so what we're after here. Colorado blade, they put out a really solid thump, and you can really feel that with that braid. Now, a lot of guys will give me crap about running braid, but let's be honest, spinnerbaits have got pretty big metal arms on them, so I'm not that worried about it. And where I'm throwing spinnerbaits, usually it's in grassy areas or areas with a lot of cover, so I'm not that worried about it. Now, what I'm doing is I'm trying to narrow down fish, trying to narrow down locations. So again, right side, center, left side. If I get a bite on that right side on multiple docks or multiple laydowns, then I know fish are looking one way. If that's the case, then I can slow down and throw a wacky worm on that right side of the docks. Boom, boom, boom. The entire dock row. If they're biting off the nose of the dock, then I'll skip a jig up under there and do it that way. It gives me an indication of fish locations. That is huge. Spot on the spot is what we're after here. That being said, if we're throwing these things on large flats where fish are just chasing bait, it's important to note that you need to probably slow down. In the nice thing with spinnerbaits is there's a few different ways to fish spinnerbaits, right? So I can throw it out and burn it back and just kind of tip the top of the water with that blade. Not enough to make the spinnerbait bounce out, but enough to where it's got kind of a bubble where that spinnerbait blade is spinning under the water. That, a lot of times, is enough of a disturbance and noise maker with those double willows to where you can get bit. Now, let's say these fish are in 8 feet of water. They're about 4 foot down, sitting at the top of a grass, flat. If that's the case, I'll count that down until I can figure out where I'm just taking the top of that grass with the bottom of the spinnerbait. They're universal, really, with where and when you can throw them because you can just count them down. It's not like a crankbait where if you stop cranking, it floats back up or it gets to its desired depth. You can go to any depth, which means there are times when I'll throw a bottom dweller, right, in 25 feet of water. Hook that thing out there in just off a flat, count it off, let it hit the bottom, and then slowly drag that thing back, making sure that blade is spinning. If I'm doing that, a lot of times I'm going to do that with a Colorado blade because that will allow me to slow that bait down even more. Obviously, the Colorado blade has a little bit more pressure in the water. It's got a little more resistance in the water, so you can really slow down that lure and keep it in the strike zone for as long as possible. But let's say, okay, I get bit way out there. Okay, cool. I'll throw a drop shot. I'll follow it up with a football head. I'll follow it up with a deep crankbait, right? If I'm counting down and the bait doesn't hit the bottom, right? That means those fish are suspended. And if the fish are suspended, then I can rule this out. I can go to a bait that's more consistent in that depth that they probably hit on. And if that's the case, a lot of times I'll go back over that spot with my sonar, look and see where those fish are, pull back off that spot, and throw a crankbait in there, or jerkbait, or whatever the depth may be. Spinnerbaits, for a lot of people anyway, are numbers bait. They're a small fish bait. Yeah, I don't think that's the case at all. I feel like spinnerbaits are a big fish bait. People just don't realize the power that spinnerbaits can yield when used properly. Now, places like Texas, California, Florida, Alabama, you can go ahead and upsize that spinnerbait. Not the way you think, though. We're not going to throw a 1 ounce spinnerbait. What we're going to do is we're going to take a 1/2 ounce spinnerbait or a 3/8 ounce spinnerbait, depending on what you've got, and throw plastic on it. Now, a project I'm working on lately is weighing soft plastics. Now, I started on this because I'm a big spinnerbait guy. I like throwing swim jigs. I like throwing jigs. I like throwing things that have plastics attached to them. So the weight of the lure is incredibly important to me. That also being said, buoyancy matters on that same lure because different things have different buoyancies, different salt contents, different additives. Not only that, but the appendages also matter. So a lot of times what I will do if I'm throwing a finesse spinnerbait is I'll take the skirt off, I'll throw a 3/8 ounce spinnerbait, and I'll throw on a small swim bait up onto that. Or I'll throw a finesse rig. The cool thing with the finesse worm is what you're going to end up with is a really small tail on that spinnerbait. It really kind of compacts that size down, obviously a little bit lighter. But if you're upsizing to say that 1/2 ounce spinnerbait again, but you're throwing a big chunky swim bait on there, that swim bait can be 1/4, 3/8 of an ounce by itself, elevating that entire spinnerbait to about 7/8 to a full ounce, while still keeping that profile of a smaller school of fish. The big thing a few years ago, right, 10 years ago now, was the A rig, the umbrella rig, whatever you want to call it. Think about it. A spinnerbait is essentially an umbrella rig on a really small scale. They don't have hooks, obviously, on the blades, but it's presenting the same idea. It's presenting a bait school. So every once in a while, what you could do is if you locate a school of fish that's feeding on bait fish, you can run that spinnerbait through that school of bait fish and go ahead and give it just a little, pop and that's going to flare that skirt out, and it's going to make those blades hit on a double willow blade. That a lot of times is enough to get something to bite. That a lot of times is enough to get something to at least look up at it, you know, and get its attention for you to make that follow-up cast with a crankbait or something like that. Now, something else you can do with the spinnerbait that a lot of people don't do is take a Sharpie to the blades. Back 20 years ago, painted blades were all the rage, right? So what I do is I'll take a black Sharpie or whatever color Sharpie I want at that time. A lot of times I carry green Sharpies because I like chartreuse on white spinnerbaits. I'll paint or mark one side of that blade in green, black, whatever. What that does is as that blade's rotating, it's going to flash, not flash, flash, not flash, flash, not flash. And it's going to present a little bit differently than if you just ran a straight up spinnerbait. But there are a lot of little things that you can do, and if you guys are interested in hearing about those little things with each type of spinnerbait, comment down below and let me know, because there's a lot of things that I'm very interested in talking about, a lot of things I think you guys would be interested in hearing about, but I don't want to make this video half an hour long. But, I mean, to kind of sum everything up that we've talked about today, what we're looking at is throwing spinnerbaits in shallow water and deep water, counting things down, being proactive about finding fish to use it as a search bait. That's what the spinnerbait really excels in, is being a search bait. But if this video helped you guys out, if this kind of gave you a little more something to think about, hit like, hit subscribe. Have a good one, guys. I will see you next time.